Here we go. We're starting week 6, and the focus for this week is going to be on continuing our discussion of My Name is Asher Lev, and specifically we're going to focus on imagery and really getting into the conflict of the story. And the reason we're going to be focusing on conflict is because that is the prompt for assignment 3, which is your last paper for this class. So the main part of the prompt is to define, describe, and explain with examples the central textual conflict outlined in Potok. So that's the same prompt that you were doing with the Book of Ruth for assignment 2. And just a reminder, this assignment isn't due until December 20th, the very last day of our class. This assignment is worth 20% of your grade, so it's the biggest percentage weight assignment that you will have in the course. And it should be around 3 to 4 pages. Next week, I'll get into more of the details and have you guys start your brainstorming and begin writing it. But just keep this in mind as you're reading through My Name is Asher Lev, that the goal of reading this book, and part of it will be to understand the conflict, or one of the conflicts, enough to write an essay about it. But to start off this week, I want to talk a little bit about imagery and literature, because imagery is one way in which we understand conflict. So if you remember from Graff and Birkenstein, we read in their book weeks ago, and they say that the best way to understand literature is to focus on the conflict. Okay, so imagery often plays into that conflict. So the definition of imagery for literature is imagery is using descriptive language and figures of speech to enhance the impact of writing. Here are a couple examples of it. He left a taste of thunder in my mouth. The streets seemed to be crying. So think of how the images of thunder in the mouth and a street crying, how that kind of adds an emotional texture to what is being said, but it also creates a picture that we can immediately understand. So like the street seemed to be crying. We imagine it being very wet and drizzly and sad. Thunder in my mouth makes it feel like kind of angry, a lot of energy coming out, kind of thunderous, and loud. So imagery is just a way of adding more description to writing rather than just saying he spoke with a loud voice. Okay? So there's 3 types of imagery I want to cover. Really in literature, there can be more, but I think these are the 3 most common that you'll see in My Name is Asher Lev. The first is what we call simile and metaphor. Okay, so these 2 types of imagery make comparisons between 2 things to show what one thing is like. So you look for words like or as if to see this imagery. So here's an example from Potok. The Rebbe killed my brother, I heard my mother say, and it was as if the words came hurtling through the black face of the universe, searing words, demonic words from the Sitra Achra, the other side, from the region of blackness that spawned horror and evil, and the stone hell that enclosed the light. Okay, so we have those words as if. So it's describing what his mother said and comparing it to kind of the black face of the universe, these searing words, demonic words. So a comparison is being made. The second type of imagery is a motif. This is a recurring element in a text that has symbolic significance. Sometimes the symbolism won't be clear until reading further. In other words, you may not recognize a motif the first time you read it. It's only in its repetition that it becomes clear that there's something important about it. Examples of this in My Name is Asher Lev is the ancestor and also the window in Asher's apartment. He's going to keep coming back to that over and over, and it plays an important role in the end of the book. All right, the third is imagery as a form of substitution. Okay, so imagery is used to represent something. It could be an idea, an event, or an emotion that the author doesn't want to mention directly. And the reason the author may not want to mention it directly could be for artistic effect, or maybe to build suspense, or maybe because the author doesn't know any other way to articulate this emotion except to kind of present it as an image. Okay, so imagery is often very symbolic. So to understand symbolism, think of some popular examples. In the movie The Lord of the Rings, there's that one big gold ring that kind of symbolizes corruption, or the power of corruption in The Lord of the Rings. That would be a form of substitution and a form of symbolism. Jesus often uses a lot of symbolism in his parables. So a common one is the sower and the seed, where the scattering of the seed represents the word of God, and the good soil or the rocky soil represents the conditions of someone's heart. You also can have iconic imagery, and religion is often full of this. So just think of the cross and all that that symbolizes to a Christian. It represents salvation. It can represent the passion or the suffering of Christ. It could also represent healing. Okay, so we are often surrounded by imagery in our everyday life that we sometimes take the symbolism of for granted. But in literature, it becomes very important that we pay attention to this symbolism and what it represents. So here's an example of imagery as substitution and symbolism in My Name is Asher Lev. That great man, the mythic ancestor, would come to me in my dreams and echo my father's queries about the latest bare wall I had decorated and sacred margins I had that day filled with drawings. Okay, so notice the connection here. Asher's associating the mythic ancestor with his father's disapproval. Okay, so there's a connection there. This mythic ancestor is almost being a substitute for his father. Instead of just dreaming about his father being mad at him drawing, he's substituting his father with this mythic ancestor. Okay, now for Asher, this substitution is kind of subconscious. I'm giving you what I think is a straightforward interpretation, but there could be other interpretations behind this symbolism. Okay, so to help you really understand symbolism, I want you to do a quick activity, and that is to first think of the happiest moment of your life, and then second, think about how this picture of these two hot air balloons could represent that happy moment in your life. And then what I want you to do is, in a few sentences, write down how this picture could be a symbol for that happy moment. But you cannot directly mention your moment, okay? So maybe you'll talk about feelings of elation or daring or what have you. But you must use kind of the symbolism of this picture to describe that moment. So I want you to do that in the worksheet, which will be right here, and you can type your answer. So when you finish this activity, go ahead and move on to the next video.